Chapter 7 of The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution by William Cooper Nell. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by the Progressing America Project. The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. Chapter 7, New Jersey. Oliver Cromwell, Samuel Charlton, Hagar. Consistent 4th of July celebration. The Burlington Gazette gives the following account of an aged colored resident of that city, which will be read with much interest. Quote, "The attention of many of our citizens has, doubtless, been arrested by the appearance of an old colored man who might have been seen, sitting in front of his residence in East Union Street, respectfully raising his hat to those who might be passing by. His attenuated frame, his silvered head, his feeble movements, combine to prove that he is very aged, and yet comparatively few are aware that he is among the survivors of the gallant army who fought for the liberties of our country in the days which tried men's souls. On Monday last, we stopped to speak to him and asked him how old he was. He asked the day of the month, and being told that it was the 24th of May, replied, with trembling lips, 'I am very old. I am 100 years old today.' His name is Oliver Cromwell, and he says that he was born at the Black Horse, now Columbus, in this county, in the family of John Hutchin. He enlisted in a company commanded by Captain Lowry, attached to the 2nd New Jersey Regiment, under the command of Colonel Israel Shreve. He was at the battles of Trenton, Princeton, Brandywine, Monmouth, and Yorktown, at which latter place, he told us, he saw the last man killed. Although his faculties are failing, yet he relates many interesting reminiscences of the Revolution. He was with the army at the retreat of the Delaware, on the memorable crossing of the 25th of December, 1776, and relates the story of the battles on the succeeding days with enthusiasm. He gives the details of the march from Trenton to Princeton, and told us, with much humor, that they knocked the British around lively at the latter place. He was also at the Battle of Springfield, and says that he saw the house burning, in which Miss Caldwell was shot, at Connecticut Farms." End quote. I further learn that Cromwell was brought up a farmer, having served his time with Thomas Hutchins, Esquire, his maternal uncle. He was, for 6 years and 9 months, under the immediate command of Washington, whom he loved affectionately. Quote, "His discharge," says Dr. McCune Smith, "at the close of the war, was in Washington's own handwriting, of which he was very proud, often speaking of it. He received, annually, $96 pension. He lived a long and honorable life. Had he been of a little lighter complexion, he was just half white. Every newspaper in the land would have been eloquent in praise of his many virtues." End quote. He left 3 sons and 3 daughters, had 14 children who reached the age of maturity, 7 sons and 7 daughters. He saw his grandchildren to the 3rd generation. He was a man of strong natural powers, never chewed tobacco nor drank a glass of ardent spirit. He died, in the town of his birth, January 24th, 1853, and now sleeps in the churchyard of the Broad Street Methodist Church. Quote, "Samuel Charlton," says Mr. McDougall, "was born in the state of New Jersey, a slave, in the family of Mr. M., who owned also other members belonging to his family, all residing in the English neighborhood. During the progress of the war, he was placed by his master, as a substitute for himself, in the army then in New Jersey, as a teamster in the baggage train. He was in active service at the Battle of Monmouth, not only witnessing, but taking a part in, the struggle of that day. He was, also, in several other engagements in different sections of that part of the state. He was a great admirer of General Washington, and was, at one time, attached to his baggage train, and received the general's commendation for his courage and devotion to the cause of liberty. Mr. Charlton was about 15 or 17 years of age, when placed in the army, for which his master rewarded him with a silver dollar. At the expiration of his time, he returned to his master, to serve again in bondage, after having toiled, fought, and bled for liberty, in common with the regular soldiery. Mr. M., at his death, by will, liberated his slaves, and provided a pension for Charlton, to be paid during his lifetime. Mr. Charlton then, with his wife, took up residence in New York City, with his son, Charles Charlton. He died 12 years since, being about 80 years of age. He and his partner were both honored and worthy members of the Dutch Reformed Church. Quote, "An old colored woman," says the Stamford Advocate, familiarly known as Hagar, died in this village on Saturday last. Her age is not exactly known, but, from the most reliable data at our command, we infer that she must have been upward of 100 years old. She was born a slave in Newark, New Jersey, and was brought to Stamford when she was 5 or 6 years old, and lived here until the day of her death. A lady, Mrs. Knapp, now living, aged 96 years, remembers that Hagar used to carry her when a child. Assuming that Mrs. Knapp must have been 3 years old at the time to which her recollection extends, and that Hagar must have been 13 to be charged with the care of children, it will make her, at the time of her death, 106 years old. Another circumstance confirms this view of the case. During the Revolutionary War, Hagar was a cook in Weed's Tavern, and her husband, George Dickens, was ostler at the same establishment. Hagar used to relate that she once cooked a dinner for General Washington when he stopped at the tavern on his way to Cambridge, Massachusetts, the headquarters of the American Army, in June 1775. On the same occasion, Washington presented to her husband a silver dollar for his namesake. Supposing Hagar to have been 27 at that time, it would make her age 106, as is the case of the first supposition. In all probability, this is very nearly her age." End quote. The Newark Eagle published, some time ago, the following account of a consistent celebration of the 4th of July, in Woodbridge. Quote, "We have recently had an interview with a person who was present at the first abolition meeting ever held in the United States. It took place in the township of Woodbridge, county of Middlesex, in this state, on the 4th of July, 1783, being the first anniversary of our independence after the close of the Revolutionary War. Great preparations had been made, an ox was roasted, and an immense number had assembled on the memorable occasion. A platform was erected, just above the heads of the spectators, and, at a given signal, Dr. Bloomfield, father of the late Governor Bloomfield, of this state, mounted the platform, followed by his 14 slaves, male and female, 7 taking their stations on his right hand, and 7 on his left. Being thus arranged, he advanced somewhat in front of his slaves, and addressed the multitude on the subject of slavery and its evils, and, in conclusion, pointing to those on his right and left, quote, "As a nation," said he, "we are free and independent, all men are created equal, and why should these, my fellow citizens, my equals, be held in bondage? From this day they are emancipated, and I here declare them free, and absolved from all servitude to me or my posterity." End quote. Then, calling up before him one somewhat advanced in years, quote, "Hector," said the doctor, "whenever you become too old or infirm to support yourself, you are entitled to your maintenance from me or my property. How long do you suppose it will be before you require that maintenance?" End quote. Hector held up his left hand, and, with his right, drew a line across the middle joints of his finger, saying, quote, "Never, never, massa, so long as any of these fingers remain below these joints." End quote. Then, turning to the audience, the doctor remarked, quote, "There, fellow citizens, you see that liberty is as dear to the man of color as to you or me." End quote. The air now rung with shouts of applause, and thus the scene ended. Quote, "Dr. Bloomfield immediately procured for Hector, either by purchase or setting off from his own farm, 3 acres of land, and built him a small house, where he resided and cultivated his little farm until the day of his death." See footnote. And it was a common remark with the neighbors that Hector's hay, when he took it to Amboy to sell, would always command a better price than their own. End quote. See footnote. Footnote 1. Quote, "This took place within the last 9 years, near Metuchen, in New Jersey, at the advanced age of 105 years. An interesting fact is connected with this gift of freedom and land. The son of Hector inherited it, and his widow now resides on it. The freed slaves generally took care of and supported themselves." End quote. Footnote 2. New Jersey disenfranchises 22,000 of her colored population. End of Chapter 7.